Welcome back to TechNet Radio. In today's episode, we have Bob Anderson and Mike Olsson as they discuss how Microsoft IT is migrating their applications to the Windows Azure platform. Listen in as they discuss lessons learned and best practices, as well as how organizations can better prepare for their own move to Windows Azure. Guys, the mic is yours.
Good day, and thank you for joining us. I'm Bob Anderson. I'm a Senior Director in Microsoft IT, responsible for IT business value evangelism. With me, I have Mike Olsson. Mike is a Principal Solution Manager in the PGSI team within Microsoft IT. Mike, can you tell me, what does PGSI mean, and can you tell us something about the PGSI group and what you're working on?
Absolutely. We're a small group. PGSI stands for Product Group Strategic Initiatives. We ultimately report to Tony Scott, our CIO.
Okay.
We are internally focused on adoption of Windows Azure. Our job is to facilitate adoption, to facilitate connections between people within Microsoft IT and the Azure Business Group.
Mm-hmm.
Above all, we want to build a community of people, of Azure practitioners within Microsoft IT to build a critical mass of expertise that we can leverage.
I think I get it. That's interesting. So then are you also doing training in that regard?
Training is a big piece.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing training around the world. We have developed some training based on the Windows Azure Platform Training Kit, which is publicly available, downloadable from MSDN or Microsoft.com. We are also working on an application segmentation and migration methodology, which I'll talk about more in just a moment.
Good.
And we are also providing dog food services, in other words, internal testing and validation of Windows Azure.
Excellent, thank you. So how is that going? We've heard that Microsoft and Microsoft IT are all in. What does all in mean? And is that real, or is that just marketing hype?
It is very much real. Being all in really expresses our commitment to Windows Azure. We are in no uncertain terms moving to Windows Azure as our default platform in the long run. We have excellent executive support. Many of you will have heard Steve Ballmer speak about the company being all in, and that level of support flows all the way down through the organization.
So they think that there's really something to gain, that this is not just the next technology.
There is a very broad awareness that we do have a great deal to gain, and we have started to find some proof points around that. We are learning a lot, and we're also looking to capture the learning and make that available to other groups within Microsoft and perhaps ultimately to our customers.
I can echo that based on my interaction with customers. They are very much interested in learning from us. Is the plan then to move everything to Azure very quickly?
It will take some time. We have a large application portfolio, 1,500 or so applications of every size and scope, ranging from very large to smaller departmental applications. We will move many of them, but perhaps not all. And this is very much a multi-year journey for us. We'll take a rational, measured approach to this. Moving to the cloud is exciting. It's the shiny new object in a group of several thousand people who are all predisposed towards technology, but we need to realize that we also have to keep the lights on. Microsoft IT's first job is to support a $60 billion business.
You know, that's very important to our customers. They just can't stop and start, change what they're doing, throw away what they've been doing for years. So this is really important. And you spoke of a journey. How have you approached that journey?
We started small. We identified very early in the piece, some candidates that might be useful for migration.
Mm-hmm.
We were looking for applications that had variability in resource usage or variability over time, seasonal variability. We started with small teams. We looked for applications with low risk. What we found was that it was surprisingly quick to get up and running. The biggest hurdle within the organization was conceptual. The programmers needed to understand what the cloud is, how their programming approach might change, how does it work.
And in doing this, have you found that there's new tools, techniques, development opportunities that they'll have to learn how to change?
Surprisingly, again, there has been very little new in the area of tools. The Azure team have been very careful to make sure that we can continue to leverage Visual Studio. The skills we have in .NET are reusable. We are able to very quickly apply the skills that already exist in the organization. In addition, we're finding that the scalability that we were looking for in these early experiments really does work as advertised.
So, containing my enthusiasm a bit, but this may not be as big a deal as one might expect then. Can you elaborate on how you selected candidates for migration?
Absolutely. There is no rocket science. This segmentation approach had us look at our applications from a high to low business risk and from high to low technical complexity. We then identified technology dependencies that might preclude migration, and I'm talking here about things like specialized hardware or application dependencies that were outside of our control. We also looked at upstream and downstream dependencies, whether they are connected to multiple other systems that would increase the complexity.
And how does being part of Microsoft MSIT come into all this? Is it different for us because we're constantly dogfooding or upgrading to the latest technologies? Will our customers perhaps face a steeper slope to get the same type of performance
Likely
experience?
not. I think it is very likely that our customer IT groups have similar systems, similar complexity, similar challenges, and similar advantages. Finally, in our segmentation, we excluded what we call sunset apps, meaning those that may have a limited lifespan.
Like us.
Exactly like us. We also then mapped our application requirements against a high-level Azure roadmap to make sure that our migration planning was in step with the Azure plan. And finally, we are taking an opportunistic approach. What I mean by that is we will look for the opportunities that might arise when an application has end-of-life hardware that needs to be replaced, when we have new features that are being written, or when in some other way we touch an application. At that point, we'll examine whether or not this is a good time to move the application, or whether we should be doing work right now in such a way that we facilitate the eventual move to Azure.
Sounds like a very thorough approach. You've put together a framework, if you will. You know, I often speak with our customers about whether or not it's time to move any given applications to Azure, and it sounds like you're taking that similar approach. Earlier, you mentioned your relationship with the Azure product group. Are you finding anything in your work that helps inform them about what they need to do or perhaps features they need to provide?
We have a great relationship with the Azure product group. It's partly dog food, partly early adopter, and partly large enterprise customer. We haven't found any incredible new features that they need to provide, but we have worked with them on prioritization. There have been features that we have found were needed earlier rather than later. They've been very good about listening and incorporating our feedback and that of our other customers. As you're aware, we have an Azure Customer Advisory Board. You're involved in that.
Yes.
They listen, and they will and have adjust the product based on that feedback.
Well, I always enjoy speaking with you, and as always, I come with a few questions and find I have more. Do you have a little more time?
Sure.
Great. You have not mentioned security in your approach, but that is a common concern we hear from our customers. How have you approached data security and privacy in particular?
It is, as you say, an important topic. We've looked at it from several angles. First of all, physical security is first class. largely because our data center folks, or the Global Foundation Services team, are highly experienced. They have been doing this for years. The technologies that are involved, virtual machines, encryptions, firewalls, are well understood and have been in use in GFS and other data centers for a long time. Weaknesses in traditional data centers might include things like inconsistent operating system updates. In a professional environment where people do nothing else, that's taken care of. And of course, Azure itself handles a lot of that stuff. The GFS data centers are also certified around a whole range or alphabet soup of standards, including SAS, or Statement on Auditing Standards, ISO standards, Sarbanes-Oxley, payment card industry, federal information security standards. If you're interested, there is a great white paper on the GFS, or Global Foundation Services site, with a lot more detail.
So that's very important, because we of course are dealing with our customers in both the public and private sector, and that list, as long as it was that you just rattled off, I know is even more complex and detailed for different areas. This is a very specialized topic. Does PGSI team have the expertise in this area?
We do not. We were very clear that it was important from the beginning to involve teams with the right expertise. In our case, we have an information security or InfoSec team that were involved very early. They have a working group that is looking at all of the aspects of this. And that's not just a function of security. In a whole range of areas around Azure adoption, it has been critical to involve the right professionals, the operations teams, those kinds of things. Those areas, operations, security, authentication, is hard, are hard. We also use our existing technology, so we've made it as easy as we can to utilize Active Directory Federation services, the Windows Identity Foundation. We've set out standards and provided education around those areas so that the developers have one less thing to worry about.
Well, that sounds excellent. Can you talk about some examples of where you have been successful in moving applications to Windows Azure?
Sure. Our early learning efforts were based around something called the auction tool. It's been well publicized. I know Tony Scott has spoken about it in many forums. It was a good learning exercise, and it showed us that it was worth pursuing. More recently, we've developed something we call the Social Experience Platform, or SXP, within our relationship division, or Relationship Experience division. They were early adopters in their own right. They effectively had some guys who really dove into the technology quickly and made it work. SXP is perhaps more of a capability than it is an application.
Interesting.
What it does is it provides comment, moderation, profanity filtering, tagging, buzz, ratings for the Microsoft.com WAC video site.
Yes.
So we're now talking about the world's largest corporate site, so we are getting some scale here. The number of hits runs into the millions per week. The service runs on Azure and on SQL Azure.
Yes.
In implementing this service, we found that not only did we go from about a 99% availability rate up to well over 4 nines.
Wow.
We also found that our costs dropped from in the region of $15,000 to just over $1,000. Because the solution was architected as a multi-tenant solution, we've now been able to onboard additional client sites for virtually no additional cost.
And where you said it was a capability, that means it has even broader opportunity areas.
We have any number of areas where we might use this.
Outstanding.
In a nutshell, we will likely never write a comment or moderation or ratings facility ever again. We'll reuse this one.
That really brings back the as-a-service aspect of what we're all about.
That is correct. Now, since you mentioned service, in our service area we have just recently implemented an interactive voice response feature based on Windows Azure that's eliminated reprogramming of the IVR functions. And more importantly, because of the global nature of the cloud, we believe we'll be able to roll it out around the world, and we will be able to make use of the Azure Content Delivery Network to distribute the voice files and other content around the world.
Oh, outstanding. Can you suggest some next steps for some of our audience who want to know more?
Sure. For additional information about what Microsoft IT is doing and on the cloud and other Microsoft IT topics, visit the Microsoft IT Showcase site.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time.